The space station floated quietly in the darkness, surrounded by stars that had watched over the galaxy for billions of years. Inside, Ambassador Kexala stood before a machine, older than most civilizations. Her scales, usually bright and shimmering, like rainbow glass, had turned dull gray from exhaustion. She hadn't slept in 3 days. Round her, the last representatives of the Galactic Coalition worked frantically at their stations. These beings came from different worlds, different species, but they all shared the same look of desperation. They were losing the war, and everyone knew it. Status report, Kexala asked, though she already knew the answer would be bad. The Vorthic swarm just finished with the Centauri system, replied her assistant, a small creature with 6 eyes that blinked nervously. Nothing left, not even bacteria. The Vorthic were like nothing the galaxy had ever seen. They appeared from deep space 2 years ago, a massive swarm of creatures that consumed everything in their path. Planets that had thrived for millions of years were stripped bare in weeks. Entire species vanished overnight. The Coalition's greatest warriors, their most advanced weapons, their cleverest strategies, nothing worked. How long until they reached the core worlds? Kexala asked. 6 months, maybe less. The room fell silent. The core worlds were where most of the galaxy's population lived, billions upon billions of souls. If the Vorthic reached them, there is one option, said an old voice from the corner. Elder Thum, ancient even by galactic standards, floated forward in his hover chair. The emergency beacon. Everyone turned to stare. The emergency beacon was a legend, a story told in whispers, built during the first age of galactic expansion. It could send a message to every corner of the galaxy, even to worlds that had been marked as forbidden. Elder, the beacon hasn't been used in 10,000 years, someone protested. We don't even know if it still works, and it broadcasts to everyone, another added, including the quarantined sectors, including the death worlds. The word death world made everyone shudder. These were planets where life had evolved in such harsh conditions that the creatures living there were considered too dangerous for contact. The Coalition had marked these worlds with the strongest warnings possible. Do not approach, do not communicate, do not disturb. Kexala looked around the room at her colleagues, at the screen showing the Vorthic's advance, at the list of dead worlds growing longer every day. They had tried everything else. Activate the beacon, she said quietly. The ancient machine hummed to life, its crystalline core glowing with energy that made the air itself sing. Kexala stepped forward and spoke into the transmission device. Her words would travel faster than light, reaching every inhabited world in the galaxy. This is Ambassador Kexala of the Galactic Coalition. We faced extinction. An enemy called the Vorthic Swarm consumes our worlds. Our armies have fallen. Our weapons have failed. To any species capable of combat, we make this offer. Help us survive, and we will give you anything. Technology, resources, planets, anything you want. Please, help us, or watch the galaxy burn. The message went out, racing through space like a cry in the dark. Then they waited. Hours passed, then days. Responses came from the civilized worlds, expressions of sympathy, but no real help. They were all as frightened as the Coalition. A few mercenary groups offered their services for impossible prices. Some religious groups suggested prayer. Then, on the 4th day, something unexpected happened. Ambassador, the communication officer, called out, his voice shaking. We have a response from Sector 2814. The room froze. Sector 2814 was deep in quarantine space. Put it through, Kexala ordered, trying to keep her voice steady. The main screen flickered to life, and the Coalition members saw their first human. The creature on the screen looked almost laughably simple compared to most galactic species. No scales, no multiple limbs, no natural armor, just soft skin, 2 eyes, and a patch of fur on its head. But something in those eyes made Kexala's scales tighten instinctively. This is Captain Chen of the Earthship Hope Springs Eternal, the human said. Behind the captain, other humans moved around what looked like the inside of a spacecraft, held together with metal strips and determination. We heard your distress call. We'd like to help. Kexala glanced at her data pad, quickly pulling up the information on Earth. What she read made her heart skip. Classification: Death World. Level 12 maximum. Extreme weather variations. High seismic activity. Aggressive fauna. Native sapient species shows unusual adaptability to hostile conditions. Warning: humans have survived multiple extinction events. Approach with extreme caution. Captain Chen. Kexala said carefully, "We appreciate your response, but are you aware of the threat level? The Vorthok have destroyed entire fleets. They adapt to our weapons. The human held up a hand." And Kexala found herself stopping mid-sentence. "Ambassador, let me tell you something about humans," Captain Chen said, leaning forward. "We come from a planet that's been trying to kill us since day one. Earthquakes, volcanoes, hurricanes, diseases, that's just Tuesday for us. We've fought predators with nothing but sharp sticks. We've survived ice ages. We've literally split atoms just to see what would happen." The captain paused, and that expression appeared on her face. The translator called it a smile, but it showed far too many teeth. "We've been fighting each other for our entire history, and we got so good at it that we had to invent rules to make it sporting. So when you ask if we're aware of the threat level," the captain's smile widened. "We're interested. When do we start?" The coalition members exchanged glances. They had sent out a call for help to the entire galaxy. They had hoped for advanced civilizations, for sophisticated weapons, for tactical genius. Instead, they got humans. Death Worlders who treated existential threats like an interesting challenge. Looking at the eager faces on the screen, at these soft, vulnerable-looking creatures who spoke of planetary destruction like it was a casual hobby, Kexala made a decision. That would change the galaxy forever. "Captain Chen," she said, "welcome to the war." The coalition forces had gathered at Waystation Prime, the largest military base in civilized space. Ships from 100 different worlds floated in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with advanced alloys and energy shields that sparkled like jewels. It was an impressive sight, or it would have been, if everyone wasn't staring at the human fleet. "Are those held together with adhesive strips?" asked Commander Vexter, a 7-foot-tall warrior whose species had conquered planets before. "Humans discovered fire. I believe the humans call it duct tape, sir," his aide replied, zooming in on one of the Earth vessels. Sure enough, silver strips seemed to be holding several hull plates in place. The human ships looked nothing like the elegant coalition vessels. They were blocky, asymmetrical things that seemed to follow no design philosophy except does it fly? Some had weapons bolted on in places that made no sense. One ship had what appeared to be a painted shark face on its nose. "They're 3 hours late," muttered another coalition officer. Actually, the communications officer interjected. "They've been here for 3 hours. They've been racing each other around the asteroid field." Everyone turned to look at the tactical display. Sure enough, the human ships were weaving between asteroids at speeds that made the coalition's safety officers wince. "Racing," Vexter repeated flatly, during a military assembly. "For the survival of the galaxy, yes, sir. They're betting on it," apparently. Before Vexter could respond, the human delegation finally arrived at the station. The airlock hissed open, and in walked 5 humans in uniforms that had definitely seen better days. Their leader, Colonel Rodriguez, stood before the assembled coalition officers without a trace of the almost species showed in. "This hall, sorry. We're late," Rodriguez said, not sounding sorry at all. "My pilot bet she could thread the needle through that double asteroid. She won." Vexter S. eyes blinked in sequence. A sign of deep confusion. "Colonel, are you aware of why we're here?" "The Vorthok threat, big bugs, eat everything, standard hive mind setup," Rodriguez interrupted, pulling out what looked like an ancient paper notebook. "We read the briefing. Got some questions, though." The coalition officers exchanged glances. Most species came to these meetings with complex holographic presentations and quantum-calculated battle strategies. The humans had a notebook and what appeared to be a beverage container. "Label Joe's rocket fuel coffee, please," Vexter said carefully, ask your questions. Rodriguez flipped through his notebook. Right, first, the Vorthok. They got any problems with extreme temperatures? They can survive in the vacuum of space and on planets with surface temperatures up to 400 degrees. An analyst replied, only 400. One of the other humans, Dr. Tanaka, perked up. That's barely a pizza oven. We can work with that pizza oven, Vexter asked weakly. Never mind, Rodriguez continued. Question 2. These bugs, they ever dealt with chemical warfare? The room went silent. The Galactic Coalition had banned chemical weapons millennia ago. They were considered too cruel, too primitive. Chemical weapons are forbidden by the Treaty of Harmony, Vexter stated firmly. Sure. Rodriguez nodded. But have they dealt with them? No. The humans exchanged looks that made the coalition very nervous. Question 3, Rodriguez continued, as if he hadn't just suggested violating sacred galactic law. What's their reproductive cycle? How fast do they multiply? Every 30 standard days, a new generation, came the answer. Slower than rabbits, another human muttered. Much slower than bacteria. We can definitely work with that. Dr. Tanaka raised her hand like a student in class. Can we get samples? Living ones? I promise we'll be careful. Careful, Vexter couldn't help himself. Doctor, these creatures have consumed entire worlds. They've killed billions. So have mosquitoes, Tanaka replied cheerfully, and we figured them out. The briefing continued for another hour, with the humans asking increasingly disturbing questions. Did the Vorthok have any cultural taboos? How? Did they communicate? What was their metabolism like? Did they have any natural predators? Could they swim? Why? Asked one brave coalition officer. Would it matter if they can swim? The human who'd asked, Lieutenant Park, shrugged. Just thinking. Earth is 70% water. We're pretty good with water. Might be useful. As the meeting concluded, Vexter found himself alone with Colonel Rodriguez in the observation deck. Looking out at the assembled fleets, Colonel, he said carefully, I must ask. Your species seems remarkably casual about this threat. The Vorthok have technology beyond yours. They have numbers beyond counting. They have General. Rodriguez interrupted, turning to face him. Let me tell you something about humans. We evolved on a planet where everything tried to eat us. The animals, the plants, even the bacteria. We had to get smart, get tough, or get dead. He pointed out at the stars. You know what we did when we ran out of predators? We became our own. We've been practicing warfare on each other for thousands of years. We've gotten so good at it. We had to invent laws to stop ourselves from getting too creative. That's terrifying, Vexter admitted. Maybe, Rodriguez agreed. But right now, you don't need nice, you need survivors. You need people who look at impossible odds and think challenge accepted. You need humans. He pulled out a small device and showed Vexter an image. It was Earth, a blue marble hanging in space, looking peaceful and serene. That's our home, Rodriguez said. Looks pretty, doesn't it? What you can't see is the supervolcanoes, the fault lines, the hurricanes, the tornadoes, the diseases, the radiation from our own sun trying to give us cancer. What you can't see is that we had to fight for every single day of survival. He put the device away. The Vorthok, they're just another predator. And humans? He grinned, showing those unsettling flat teeth that evolution had given them for tearing both plants and meat. We're really good at dealing with predators. As Rodriguez walked away to rejoin his team, Vexter noticed something. The human ships, for all their ugly appearance and haphazard construction, were already moving into defensive positions around the coalition vessels. They weren't waiting for orders. They weren't asking for permission. They were already hunting. And for the first time since the Vorthok appeared, Vexter felt something besides despair. He felt hope. And somehow, that was almost more frightening than the alternative. The sky above Kepler 4-4 to be turned dark as the Vorthok swarm descended. Millions of creatures blocked out the sun, their chittering creating a sound like thunder that never stopped. The coalition observation post was built into a mountain 5 miles from the abandoned city, its occupants watching through reinforced screens as humanity's first real test began. Shouldn't the humans be retreating to defensive positions? Asked Officer Zeta, her feathers ruffling with anxiety. On the screens, human forces were doing the opposite of retreating. Fighter pilots were actually flying toward the swarm. "This is Dragonfleet Squadron, going in hot," came a cheerful voice over the comms. Lieutenant Park's fighter craft, a thing held together by willpower and welded patches, shot straight up toward the descending swarm. "Remember, folks, whoever gets the most takes home the pot. They're gambling," Zeta said faintly. "They're gambling on killing counts during an invasion." The coalition observers watched in stunned silence as human pilots performed maneuvers that should have been impossible. They flew through gaps in the swarm that barely existed, spinning and rolling in ways that would have knocked out any other species. The G-forces alone should have been fatal. How are they surviving those turns? Someone asked. According to their medical files, the coalition doctor replied, checking his datapad. Humans can temporarily withstand up to 9 times their planet's gravity. They call it pulling Gs. And apparently, they do it for entertainment. On the ground, the abandoned city had been transformed. The humans had arrived 2 days ago with basic equipment and local materials. Now, as the first Vorthic touched down, the aliens discovered what human creativity looked like when applied to warfare. "Contact, they're hitting Sector 7, called Specialist Santos from her position. She was grinning as she watched her handiwork come to life. The Vorthic, accustomed to enemies who used energy weapons they could adapt to, encountered something entirely different. The ground itself seemed to explode beneath them, not with advanced plasma charges or antimatter, but with simple chemical explosives, made from fertilizer and fuel. "Mining equipment makes great weapons," Santos explained to the shock coalition. Observer beside her. "Back home, we figured that out real quick. All you need is the right mix," and another explosion cut her off. A cluster of Vorthic warriors simply ceased to exist? Are those farming supplies? The observer asked weakly. "Yep, turns out nitrogen-based fertilizer is super versatile. My grandpa taught me that trick. He used it for removing tree stumps." But scaled up, she shrugged happily. The Vorthic hive mind, which had conquered civilizations with technology centuries ahead of Earth, found itself struggling to understand human tactics. These creatures didn't follow any logical pattern. They used primitive projectile weapons that punched through armor designed to stop energy beams. They laid traps in places that made no tactical sense until suddenly they did. They fought with a chaotic coordination that somehow worked out in the city center. Sergeant Thompson's squad had turned a grain silo into a fortress. They'd cut holes in the metal sides for firing positions and somehow rigged the grain dispersal system into a flamethrower. "How's everyone doing on ammo?" Thompson called out, picking off Vorthic with careful shots. "Running low, Sarge," someone replied. "Switch to the fun stuff then." The fun stuff turned out to be improvised weapons. That made the coalition observers question everything they knew about warfare. Humans were using construction equipment as weapons. They turned cleaning chemicals into gas grenades. One soldier had somehow made a functioning catapult out of steel beams and cargo straps. "Is that soldier using a mining laser as a sword?" Zeta asked in disbelief. Indeed. Private Johnson had run out of ammunition and decided that a close-quarters mining tool would work just fine. The fact that it wasn't designed as a weapon didn't seem to bother him or slow him down. The Vorthic were learning, adapting as they always did. Their armor grew thicker against projectiles. They spread out to avoid the explosives. They began to predict the human patterns. That's when the humans revealed they'd been holding back. "All units, Phase 2 is a go," Colonel Rodriguez's voice came over all channels. "Let's show them why Earth is a death world." The city's water system, which the humans had spent a day fixing, suddenly came alive. But instead of water, it sprayed something that made the Vorthic sensory organs burn. The aliens recoiled, their formation breaking, capsaicin solution. Dr. Tanaka explained proudly to the horrified coalition team. Basically super concentrated. Hot sauce, completely non-lethal, but really, really unpleasant. We use it for riot control back home. You use chemical weapons on your own species? Zeta gasped. Double quotes. Well, when you put it that way, it sounds bad, Tanaka admitted. But it's organic. The Vorthik tried to retreat to the sky, only to find the human pilots had been busy. They'd been flying in patterns that looked random, but had actually been herding the swarm into a tighter formation. Now, trapped between the caustic spray below and the fighters above, the Vorthik found themselves in what humans call a kill box. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it ended, the impossible had happened. The Vorthik swarm, or what was left of it, fled. They left behind thousands of dead, killed by a species with technology centuries behind the galactic standard. In the observation post, the coalition team sat in stunned silence. On their screens, human soldiers were already collecting Vorthik samples for study, treating the aftermath of a historic battle like a science field trip. They won, Zeta said quietly. They actually won. Of course we won, Thompson said over the comm, his team now missing various pieces of equipment and sporting creative bandages. You guys made it sound hard. These bugs don't even have ranged weapons. Back home, we have to deal with bears. Bears are way scarier than these things. Bears? Zeta asked weakly. Large terrestrial predators, her assistant supplied. Apparently humans sometimes fight them with their bare hands. For fun, Thompson added helpfully. Well, not for fun. Usually because the bear is between us and food, or because someone was dumb enough to get between a bear and her cubs. But my uncle once, Rodriguez's voice cut in. Thompson, stop traumatizing our allies. Tanaka, how soon can you analyze those samples? Give me 12 hours and a lot of coffee, the scientist replied. I've got some ideas about their biology that could be real helpful. As the coalition forces prepared to leave, Zeta found herself looking at the battlefield one last time. The humans were laughing, sharing rations, and already planning improvements for the next encounter. They just faced down a threat that had consumed entire civilizations, and they were treating it like a successful camping trip. They're insane, she murmured. No. Her commander replied quietly. They're survivors, and right now, that's exactly what we need. The message went out across the coalition network within hours. The humans had won. The Death Worlders had faced the Vorthik and emerged victorious, and they were just getting started. News traveled fast through coalition space. The impossible had happened. Humans had defeated a Vorthik swarm, not with superior technology, not with overwhelming numbers, but with fertilizer bombs and hot sauce. Every military academy in the galaxy was scrambling to understand how a species that still used projectile weapons had succeeded where advanced civilizations had failed. In the war room of Coalition Command, Admiral Zekan watched the tactical displays with growing concern. The humans weren't just winning battles. They were changing the entire nature of the war. Report from the Altair system. An aide announced, the human squadron there has. They've turned an asteroid into what they call a bug zapper. Explain, Zekan ordered. Though he wasn't sure he wanted to know, they hollowed out a small asteroid, filled it with some kind of electrical grid powered by a ship's reactor, and covered the outside with food waste. The Vorthik are attracted to the organic matter. Enter the asteroid, and the aide paused. The humans are keeping score, sir. They've named it the Roach Motel. Zekan's tentacles drooped. In 3 weeks, humans had nicknamed their enemies space roaches and were treating the war like an extermination job, rather than an existential threat. What disturbed him more were the methods. Each human victory was more creative and more terrifying than the last. They discovered the Vorthik communicated through pheromones and had somehow synthesized fake signals that sent entire swarms into confusion. They turned mining ships into combat vessels by strapping engines to asteroids and launching them like missiles. One human pilot had defeated a Vorthik warrior in single combat using what she called pest spray, apparently a common household item on Earth. Sir, another aide interrupted. Dr. Tanaka is requesting permission to address the council. She says it's urgent. Minutes later, the human scientist stood before the assembled coalition leadership, practically bouncing with excitement. Her Lab coat was stained with something the Coalition didn't want to identify, and she hadn't slept in days, but her eyes were bright with discovery. "I've cracked it," she announced without preamble. "The Vorthic regeneration. It's not true regeneration at all. It's more like controlled cancer." The room fell silent. The Vorthic's ability to heal from almost any wound was what made them so dangerous. Cancered Admiral Zekan asked carefully. "Runaway cell growth," Tanaka explained, pulling up a holographic display. "On Earth, we've been fighting cancer for centuries. We know all about cells that won't stop growing. The Vorthic use a similar process for healing, but here's the beautiful part. It's controllable. They turn it on and off with specific chemical triggers." She paused, grinning in a way that made several Coalition members step back. "So all we have to do is break the off switch. You're suggesting we give them cancer?" Someone asked, horrified. "Not give them cancer," Tanaka corrected. "They already have it. We just make sure they can't turn it off. One injection of this compound." She held up a vial of clear liquid, and their own healing ability becomes their worst enemy. They'll literally grow themselves to death. The ethical committees immediately began protesting. This violated every rule of civilized warfare. It was cruel. It was unusual. It was effective. Rodriguez interrupted, entering the room. "Doc, how fast can you mass-produce that stuff? Give me a week and access to any chemical plant." Tanaka replied, "This uses mostly common compounds." The trick was figuring out the right combination. The Coalition leadership found themselves in an impossible position. The humans were winning, but their methods grew more disturbing by the day. They turned household items into weapons, mining equipment into bombs, and now they wanted to turn the Vorthic's own biology against them. "Perhaps," Admiral Zekan suggested carefully, "we should try negotiating with the Vorthic." "Now that we've shown we can fight back," "Already tried," Rodriguez said. "Sent a diplomatic message yesterday. They sent back our diplomat in pieces. Very small pieces." The room winced. "So," Rodriguez continued, "we can do this the hard way or the harder way. The hard way is we use Doc's serum. The harder way is we continue with conventional tactics, lose more lives, and eventually use the serum anyway when everyone realizes we have no choice." Captain Chen appeared on the main screen, calling in from the front lines. Behind her, human crews were doing something to captured Vorthic ships that involved a lot of welding and duct tape. "Admiral, with respect, you hired us because we're from a death world," she said. "This is what death world thinking looks like. We don't fight fair because fair gets you killed. We fight to win, and we fight to make sure the enemy thinks twice before trying again." "The humans have a point," said General Vexter, surprising everyone. "In 3 weeks, they've done more damage to the Vorthic than we did in 2 years. Their methods are unconventional, but they work. Unconventional," someone muttered. "They turned a recreational music festival into a sonic weapon. They're using something called heavy metal to disrupt Vorthic communications." "Hey, it works," Thompson's voice came over the comm. He was apparently listening in. "Turns out the frequency of a good bass drop really messes with their antenna things. Plus, it's great for morale. You haven't lived until you fought space. Bugs to a soundtrack." The debate raged for hours. The Coalition's civilized sensibilities warred with the practical need for survival. In the end, it was a simple numbers game. At the current rate, the Vorthic would reach the core worlds in 4 months with human tactics. They might never reach them at all. "Do it," Admiral Zekan finally ordered. "Produce the serum. But I want options for negotiation ready the moment the Vorthic show any willingness to talk." As the meeting ended, he found himself alone with Rodriguez. "Tell me honestly, Colonel," Zekan said, "does your species have any limits? Is there anything you wouldn't do to win?" Rodriguez was quiet for a moment, thinking. "We've got rules, Admiral. Lots of them. Geneva Conventions, laws of war, codes of conduct. We made those rules because we know what we're capable of without them. We're choosing to bend some rules to save your galaxy. But we're not breaking our core ones. We're not targeting civilians. We're not using torture. We're fighting soldiers who chose to invade." He paused. But if they threaten Earth, if they go after our home, our families, his expression hardened. Then you'll see what a species from a death world does when you really make them angry. And trust me, Admiral, you don't want to see that. As Rodriguez left, Admiral Zekan updated his report for the Coalition archives. The humans were winning the war. But at what cost to the galaxy's soul? They'd introduced concepts like acceptable casualties and total war. They'd shown that victory could be achieved through chemistry sets and creativity rather than honor. And advanced technology. The galaxy would survive because of the Death Worlders. Whether it would ever be the same was another question entirely. 6 months. That's all it took for the galaxy to change forever. Ambassador Kexala stood in the Grand Council chamber, looking out at representatives from every civilized world. The same room that had echoed with despair half a year ago now buzzed with a different energy, relief mixed with something else, fear, perhaps. Not of the Vorthic anymore, but of their saviors. The Vorthic have agreed to remain within their original 3 systems, she announced. They will not expand beyond the borders established in the Treaty of New Terra. The Treaty of New Terra, even the name showed how much influence humans had gained. They'd named the peace agreement after their own world, and nobody had dared. Object. In the audience, Colonel Rodriguez sat with his team, looking remarkably casual for people who'd just saved the galaxy. Thompson was actually napping, his feet up on the chair in front of him. Dr. Tanaka was reading something on her tablet, occasionally giggling at whatever she'd found. Captain Chen was carving something into the arm of her chair with a pocket knife. The Vorthic have also agreed to trade negotiations, Kexala continued. They're particularly interested in something humans call pest control services. A ripple of uncomfortable laughter went through the room. The Vorthic, the terror of the galaxy, the unstoppable swarm, were now hiring humans as exterminators. For their own worlds, it turned out they had their own problems with smaller, more annoying species. How did this happen? Someone in the audience asked. How did they go from destroying worlds to this? Rodriguez stood up, stretching. Simple. We gave them a choice. Stop expanding or deal with humans who actually enjoyed fighting them. Turns out, even a hive mind can recognize a bad deal. The truth was more complex, and everyone knew it. The final battle had taken place near the Vorthic's home systems. The humans hadn't just won. They'd gotten creative. Again, they'd taken Tanaka's serum and put it in everything. Missiles, gas clouds, even the water supply of captured Vorthic ships. Then they broadcast a simple message. This is just us being nice. Imagine what we'll do if you make us angry. The clincher had been Chen's idea. She'd taken a small team and actually landed on a Vorthic agricultural world, not to attack, but to help. They'd shown the Vorthic how to deal with their own pests, problems, taught them human farming techniques, and shared something called barbecue sauce that the Vorthic apparently loved. Carrots and sticks, Chen had explained. Show them we can be their worst nightmare or their best friend. Their choice, the Vorthic. Faced with a species that treated their armies like a minor annoyance but was genuinely helpful when not threatened, had chosen friendship. It was, as Thompson put it, just good sense. Now, as Kexala read through the treaty terms, the Coalition faced a new reality. Humans hadn't just saved them. They'd fundamentally changed how the galaxy worked. Article 15, she read. The establishment of human advisory positions in all Coalition military forces. Advisory. Rodriguez had said with a grin when they'd written that part. We're not taking over. Just suggesting. Strongly suggesting. The suggestions were already changing everything. Human military academies were teaching courses with names like Improvised Weaponry 101 and Psychological Warfare for Beginners. Coalition species were learning that anything could be a weapon if you were creative enough. A mining laser could be a sword. A farming tool could be a bomb. Music could be a weapon. Even food could be weaponized. The infamous Carolina Reaper incident was already becoming legend. Article 23, Kexala continued, her voice carefully neutral. Classification of Earth will be updated from Quarantine Death World to Allied Death World. Approach with respect. The humans had found that old classification hilarious. They'd even made T-shirts, Earth, Certified Death World, Visit. At your own risk, they were selling surprisingly well at the Coalition gift shops. As the ceremony concluded, Kexala found herself in a quiet corner with Dr. Tanaka, who was still working on something even after the war's end. "What are you researching now?" Kexala asked, almost afraid of the answer. "Oh, just some ideas," Tanaka said cheerfully. "Did you know your galaxy has 12 other species marked as potential threats? I'm thinking we could try the human approach with them too. Make friends instead of enemies." The human approach? Yeah. Show up, be helpful, share some food, maybe teach them some card games. Works better than shooting at them, usually. It was such a simple philosophy. Yet it had worked where all the Coalition's complex strategies had failed. Humans didn't just win through violence, they won by being unpredictably kind when kindness was least expected. Later that evening, at the celebration feast, Kexala watched the humans interact with other species. They were teaching a group of Altarians something called poker, had started an arm wrestling tournament with the Benedrax warriors, and someone had set up what they called a karaoke machine that was producing sounds that definitely violated several noise ordinances. So, she searched for the word. Chaotic offered General Vexter, who'd become oddly fond of the humans, unpredictable, slightly insane, alive, Kexala finished. They're so incredibly alive, and that, perhaps, was the real secret. The humans came from a world that tried to kill them daily, so they learned to live each moment fully. They fought with everything they had, loved with equal intensity, and turned even war into something weirdly joyful. Rodriguez appeared beside them, offering what he called beer, another Earth invention that was rapidly gaining popularity. "So," he said, raising his drink, "what's next for the Coalition?" "Recovery," Kexala said. "Rebuilding. Learning to live with the knowledge that we're not alone, and that some of our neighbors are." "Death Worlders," Rodriguez grinned. "Get used to it. The universe is a dangerous place. Good thing you've got humans on your side now." "Indeed," Vexter rumbled. "Though I must ask, what would you have done if the Vorthic hadn't surrendered?" Rodriguez's grin faded slightly. "You don't want to know. Let's just say we had plans involving their son and leave it at that." The two aliens exchanged glances. The humans had saved them, yes, but they'd also shown the galaxy what a species evolved on a Death World was capable of. It was humbling, terrifying, and somehow reassuring all at once. As the night wore on and the celebration continued, Kexala updated the final entry in the official record. The Coalition called for aid and received it from the most unlikely source, Earth, a death world whose inhabitants turned survival into an art form and warfare into a science. They saved us not through superior technology, but through creativity, determination, and a disturbing willingness to weaponize anything. The galaxy is safer for their presence. Whether it's ready for them remains to be seen. End report. In the background, someone had started teaching the Vorthic ambassador how to play chess. The alien was losing badly and loving every minute of it. The galaxy would never be the same. And somehow, that was exactly what it needed.